Have you ever heard of a killer who planned his crimes with the precision of a military operation, leaving almost no trace behind? A ghost who traveled thousands of miles, burying kill kits across the country, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is the story of Israel Keyes, a man who lived a double life and became one of America's most terrifying and elusive serial killers. For years, Israel Keyes was just an ordinary guy. He was a devoted father, a quiet neighbor, and a successful construction business owner in Anchorage, Alaska. No one in his life had any idea about the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. He was a master of deception, blending in so perfectly that his monstrous secrets remained hidden in plain sight. But Keyes was far from ordinary. He was a predator who hunted humans. Unlike many serial killers who stick to a specific area or victim type, Keyes was chillingly random. He would fly to a city, rent a car, and drive hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to a completely different state. There, he'd dig up a pre-buried kit containing weapons, zip ties, and tools for body disposal. He would then target a victim at random, often in remote places like parks, campgrounds, or isolated homes. This randomness was his greatest weapon, making his crimes nearly impossible to connect or predict. The story of how he was finally caught begins with his last known victim, an 18-year-old barista from Anchorage named Samantha Koenig. In February 2012, Samantha vanished from the coffee stand where she worked. Security footage captured a masked man forcing her away at gunpoint. The abduction sparked a massive search and a desperate plea for her safe return. For weeks, there were no leads, no suspects, no answers. The city was on edge, fearing the worst. Then, a strange development occurred. The kidnapper began communicating with Samantha's family, demanding a ransom. The instructions were specific: deposit money into Samantha's bank account. This would be Keyes' fatal mistake. While he was meticulously careful in his physical crimes, he underestimated the power of digital forensics. After the ransom was paid, Keyes began using Samantha's debit card. He made a small withdrawal in Anchorage, then another in Arizona, and then another in New Mexico. Law enforcement tracked the card's activity across the country, creating a digital trail that led them straight to him. On March 13, 2012, Texas state troopers pulled over a white Ford Focus for a minor traffic violation. The driver was Israel Keyes. Inside the car, they found Samantha Koenig's phone and debit card, along with a gun and a disguise. The ghost was finally caught. In custody, Keyes began a series of chilling interviews with the FBI. He was calm, articulate, and shockingly candid about his crimes, but only on his own terms. He confessed to Samantha Koenig's murder, revealing he had killed her just hours after her abduction. The ransom demands he made were a cold, calculated move to buy himself time and throw off investigators. He led them to her body, which he had disposed of in a frozen lake north of Anchorage. But Samantha was just the tip of the iceberg. Keyes admitted to being a prolific killer with victims all across the United States. He confessed to the 2011 murder of Bill and Lorraine Carrier in Essex, Vermont. He described breaking into their home, tying them up, and driving them to an abandoned farmhouse where he killed them. Their bodies have never been found. Keyes made it clear he enjoyed the process, the control, the terror. He told investigators he had been committing crimes like this for over a decade. He revealed his method: the kill kits. Buried years in advance, these 5-gallon buckets were his arsenal, waiting for him across the country. He had kits in Washington, Wyoming, New York, and likely many other states. He told investigators where to find 2 of them, and when the FBI dug them up, they contained exactly what he described: guns, ammunition, restraints, and supplies to dispose of a body. Keyes claimed at least 11 victims, but the true number may never be known. He played a twisted game with investigators, offering details of some crimes while remaining vague about others. He hinted at victims in Washington state, a murder in New York, and a body disposed of in a lake. He spoke of bank robberies, arsons, and other violent acts he committed simply for the thrill. He told them he chose his victims randomly, with no emotional connection, which is why he was so hard to catch. There was no pattern, no link between the victims, just a phantom killer moving across the map. He explained his rules. No killing in his home state of Alaska at first. No victims he knew. No using his own name or car during the crime. He studied other serial killers to learn from their mistakes. He was a student of murder, dedicated to perfecting his dark craft. The interviews with Keyes provide a terrifying window into the mind of a psychopath. He showed no remorse, no empathy. He spoke about murder with the same detached tone someone might use to describe their job. For him, it was a hobby, a release. He confessed that he got a high from it, an adrenaline rush that nothing else could provide. But the cat-and-mouse game was coming to an end. In December 2012, while awaiting trial, Israel Keyes took his own life in his jail cell. He left behind a blood-soaked note, a rambling poem filled with dark imagery and nihilistic thoughts. He took the secrets of his other victims with him to the grave, leaving countless questions unanswered and families without closure. The case of Israel Keyes is a chilling reminder that monsters can wear the most ordinary masks. He was a killer who defied all the typical profiles, a true anomaly in the world of criminology. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Evil can be organized, intelligent, and hiding right next door. The FBI continues to seek information about his travels, hoping to one day identify his unknown victims and bring some measure of peace to their families. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as chilling as I did, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into true crime mysteries. Stay safe out there. He was called the most prolific serial killer in American history, but for decades, he was just a ghost, a phantom preying on the forgotten. Today, we're delving into the dark and disturbing story of Samuel Little. Born Samuel McDowell in 1940, his life began on a troubled path. His mother, a woman forced into a life on the streets, gave him up shortly after birth. Raised by his grandmother in Lorain, Ohio, Little's childhood was far from stable. He struggled in school, both academically and socially, and his criminal record started early. By his teenage years, he was already involved in petty crimes like burglary and theft, which landed him in a juvenile institution. This was just the beginning of a life spent in and out of the justice system. As a young man, Little drifted across the country, a nomad with no real home or direction. He supported himself through theft, robbery, and whatever he could hustle. His criminal activities escalated over the years, leading to arrests in numerous states for crimes, ranging from shoplifting and fraud to assault and breaking and entering. He was a familiar face to law enforcement in dozens of cities, yet nobody saw the bigger, more sinister picture. He was a drifter, a petty criminal, but under the surface, a monster was taking shape. Little's method was chillingly consistent. He targeted vulnerable women, often those living on the fringes of society: sex workers, drug users, or those experiencing homelessness. These were women he believed wouldn't be missed, whose disappearances might not even be reported. He would often approach them in bars or on the street, using his charm and seemingly non-threatening demeanor to gain their trust. He was also a skilled artist and a former amateur boxer, and he would use his physical strength to overpower his victims. His attacks were brutal. He would typically knock his victims out with powerful punches before strangling them. This method often left few obvious signs of foul play. In many cases, especially in the 70s and 80s, their deaths were misclassified. Authorities would rule them as accidental overdoses, unexplained accidents, or natural causes. The victims were often unidentified, listed as Jane Does, and their cases quickly went cold. Little was a ghost, leaving a trail of bodies that nobody was connecting. For decades, Samuel Little moved from city to city, state to state, leaving a wake of destruction that went unnoticed. He was arrested countless times, but usually for lesser offenses. He even faced murder charges in the early 1980s in Florida and Mississippi, but in both cases, he was acquitted. Witnesses were not deemed credible. Evidence was insufficient, and Little walked free, leaving prosecutors and investigators frustrated. These acquittals only emboldened him, reinforcing his belief that he was untouchable, that he could get away with anything. The turning point finally came in 2012. Little was arrested at a homeless shelter in Kentucky on a narcotics charge and extradited to Los Angeles. It was there that LAPD detectives, using DNA evidence, linked him to 3 unsolved murders from the 1980s. These were the cases of Carol Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe Apodaca. The DNA was the key, the irrefutable link that decades of police work had failed to find. In 2014, Samuel Little was convicted of these 3 murders and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. For most people, that would be the end of the story. A killer finally brought to justice, locked away for good. But for one Texas Ranger, James Holland, it was just the beginning. Holland had a hunch that the 3 LA murders were just the tip of the iceberg. He saw a pattern in Little's life, his constant travel, and the types of victims he chose. He believed Little was responsible for far more. Holland began visiting Little in prison, trying to build a rapport with the aging killer. It was a slow and painstaking process. At first, Little was resistant, denying everything. But Holland was persistent. He didn't treat Little like a monster. He treated him like a man with a story to tell. He brought him his favorite snacks, talked about sports, and listened patiently. He wasn't just interrogating him. He was building a strange kind of relationship. And slowly, meticulously, the dam began to break. Little started talking. And once he started, he couldn't stop. He began to confess to murders, one after another, in astonishing detail. He had a photographic memory for his crimes, recalling locations, what his victims looked like, and the circumstances of their deaths, even decades later. He spoke of murders in Florida, in Texas, in Ohio, in Louisiana, all across the country. To verify these confessions, the FBI and Texas Rangers had a brilliant idea. They knew Little was a talented artist. They gave him drawing materials and asked him to sketch his victims. The result was a chilling gallery of portraits, drawn from memory. He produced dozens of sketches of the women he claimed to have killed. These drawings were hauntingly detailed, capturing the life in his victims' eyes, a life he had brutally extinguished. The FBI released these drawings to the public, hoping to identify the victims and bring closure to their families. And it worked. Law enforcement agencies from across the country began re-examining cold cases. A sketch would be matched to an old photo of a missing person. A Jane Doe would finally be given a name, and a family would finally learn the fate of their loved one after years or even decades of uncertainty. The scale of Little's crimes was staggering. He confessed to a total of 93 murders committed between 1970 and 2005. As of today, law enforcement has definitively confirmed his involvement in over 60 of those cases, making him, without a doubt, the most prolific serial killer in American history. The true number may never be known, but it's likely even higher than the 93 he confessed to. Samuel Little's story is a chilling reminder of how easily the most vulnerable among us can be forgotten. His victims were largely ignored by society, and their deaths were overlooked by a system that failed them. He was able to operate for so long because he preyed on the invisible, the people whose absence wouldn't raise immediate alarms. It's a story with so many layers. The systemic failures that allowed him to slip through the cracks for half a century, the brilliant detective work that finally unraveled his web of deceit, and the heartbreaking reality for the families who waited decades for answers. Samuel Little died in prison in December 2020, taking many more secrets to his grave. But his confessions and the haunting portraits he drew have given names back to the nameless and offered a small measure of peace to families who had lost all hope. His case forced law enforcement to re-evaluate how they investigate deaths among marginalized communities and highlighted the importance of DNA technology. It's a dark chapter in American crime history, but one that holds crucial lessons we can't afford to forget. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into fascinating cases. Stay safe out there